In 2003, I moved from New York City to Bombay, India. And a lot of my friends are like, you crazy? Why would you leave New York for India? It's dirty. You can't drink the water. And yeah, to be fair, I mean, it was dirty. You couldn't drink the water. And if I had listened to all that and tried to, think it through, I would have never gone because none of it made logical sense. And my 2.5 years of living in Bombay, India was 2.5 of the best years of my life. It wasn't because of the job, although that was great. It's because of the people. And I don't mean drinking buddies or people you just hang out with. I mean the kind of people you would introduce to your family. Real relationships. That experience changed me. And the crazy part, I almost didn't go. Not because I didn't have the opportunity, but because I kept trying to make it make sense. Some background for you. I had been trying to work overseas for about 5 or 6 years up to that point. Sending resumes, taking interviews, getting close. And then when something would fall through, and every time it did, I go back to thinking it through. What should I do? What made sense? What was the smart move? In 1998, I had a $400 phone bill because I faxed out hundreds of resumes to hotels overseas. And my friends would ask me, why are you so obsessed with moving abroad? I couldn't explain it. I mean, there are obvious answers, right? Travel, new experiences, but honestly, I had barely left the country. All I could say is, I don't know, it just feels right. And that drove me nuts because I couldn't justify it. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't prove it was the right move. And that's the part that drives guys like you insane, because if you can't explain it, you can't trust it. So you override it. You go back to logic, back to what makes sense, back to the version of your life that already exists. In 2001, I flew to Jakarta, Indonesia for an interview for an executive chef position of a 4-star hotel. They offered me the job, $5,000 a month, tax-free, apartment, full benefits. I mean, on paper, it was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted. This is exactly the kind of decision people overthink themselves into. That was the ticket, but I turned it down because something felt off. I just couldn't explain it. I just knew it wasn't right, and it made zero sense logically, which is why most people would have talked themselves into taking it anyways. And this is where most guys screw themselves because they don't trust the signal, so they default to the spreadsheet, the salary, title, stability, and they end up locking themselves into a life that looks right but feels completely off. In 2002, I get a phone call. I remember I was walking down 86th Street in Manhattan. The VP of Food and Beverage from Hyatt says, hey, Kurt, I got something for you. It's going to come out of left field. What do you think about Mumbai? I'm like, what's Mumbai? He's like, Bombay, India. I'm like, ah. I said, man, I appreciate it, but I just can't see myself living in India. Hard no. Again, me trying to make the smart, rational decision, trying to stay in control. And then after that, I didn't hear shit for about a year. And I thought, crap, maybe this overseas thing is not going to happen. But here's what didn't make sense. I was in New York City, one of the best places in the world to be a chef. And still, it felt like there was nothing there for me. I couldn't explain it. I just knew. I wasn't supposed to stay. And this is where overthinking really screws you. Because now you start doubting your own signals. You ever notice that? Everything looks good on paper. You start losing patience faster. Small things irritate you. You're still performing, but you feel like you're dragging. That's not burnout, that's misalignment. About a year later, that same opportunity came back. Mumbai. Same job, same offer. And this time I jumped on, said yes. Nothing about the opportunity changed. This is important because most guys are sitting there waiting for the perfect option to show up. It doesn't. What changes is your willingness to move without certainty. I did. I became more open and flexible, less locked into what I thought life should look like. And more importantly, I stopped trying to overthink my way into certainty. I still remember sitting in my office when I got the offer letter. The feeling was, I mean, you would have thought I won the Super Bowl or a Grammy. That's how I felt. Not because I had a perfect plan, but because I finally stopped fighting the decision. That experience taught me something big. I used to try to control everything. And up until that point, life had mostly gone according to plan. India was not part of that plan. But what I learned is you got to leave room for what you didn't plan, because sometimes that is where the real move is. And control sounds smart, but most of the time it's just us overthinking in a suit. I had to learn that lesson yet again when my chef career ended, because I didn't have a plan. I thought being a chef would be my life. So when it ended, I just didn't feel lost. I felt like I had no identity. And when you don't have a plan, overthinking goes into overdrive. At one point, I took a job as a server in an Italian restaurant. Not exactly the next logical step. And on paper, that's how it appeared. Because if your identity is tied to status, that move feels impossible. So you stay where you are, not because it's right, but because it protects how you're seen. Ego. But that led to a connection, which led to another opportunity, running a wine and spirits promotional agency. And I grew that company from 12 employees in 4 cities to 250 employees in 3 states. If I sat there trying to figure it out, none of that happens. And that's when I realized what feels like a step back is often the setup for your next move. You just can't see it at the time because you're in it. You're too busy trying to think your way out of something that actually requires movement. I told myself I was being smart, careful, strategic. Yeah, really, I was just delaying decisions that would force me to change, to the point that it cost me 5 years of my life and $250,000. I made all of those transitions harder than they needed to be. And it wasn't because I lacked skill, but because I had a rigid idea of how my life was supposed to go. And when reality didn't match that plan, it felt like everything was falling apart. I wasn't stuck. I was overthinking every move instead of making one. This is what usually freaks people out. Not change, uncertainty. When you don't know what's next. Even worse, when you can't see the path. That's when people panic. Especially if you're used to being in control, because you can't think your way to an answer you don't have yet. And it's not only about clarity, seeing the whole path. It's just stop forcing the wrong one. And you definitely don't need to sit there trying to think your way into the perfect decision. Because if you are facing some uncertainty, well, that same way of thinking and that same brain is not going to think you out of it. Looking back, if I had listened to everyone else, I would have never gone to India. And it would have cost me one of the best experiences of my life. And here's the part most people don't want to admit. It's not just the experiences you lose, it's momentum, confidence, your edge. You don't wake up one day stuck. You get there by stacking, I'll figure it out, over and over and over until later becomes your life. Sometimes you got to find out for yourself, even if it doesn't make sense yet. And if you're the kind of guy who keeps trying to figure it out, who keeps thinking instead of deciding, that's exactly why you feel stuck. Because at some point, more thinking becomes the problem. So let me ask you, how many more times are you going to think it through before you admit it's not clarity you're missing, it's a decision? That's why I put together the No BS Thinking Toolkit. It's the exact frameworks I use to help guys stop overthinking and start making clear decisions. If that's you, check out the link in the description. Cheers. See you next week.